At 94, Clint Eastwood, the legendary filmmaker and actor, has lived a life filled with triumphs, challenges, and an enduring legacy. Known for his quiet strength and deep introspection, he's now speaking candidly about something most shy away from – his funeral. With age comes clarity, and Eastwood has revealed a surprising detail. There are certain people he would prefer not to attend his final farewell. It's not about grudges or drama, but about preserving the authenticity of a moment that matters deeply to him. In a world obsessed with fame and spectacle, his words serve as a reminder that some farewells are meant to be intimate, honest, and free from pretense. This revelation offers a rare glimpse into his values. Tom Hanks. Let's start with Tom Hanks. Back in 2016, Hanks starred in Sully, Miracle on the Hudson, a gripping true story drama directed by Clint Eastwood. The film was a box office success, raking in over $240 million worldwide on a modest $60 million budget. Critics praised it, audiences loved it, and as always, Hanks delivered a compelling performance. But behind the scenes, things weren't quite as smooth as the public image suggested. Working with Eastwood left a much deeper impression on Hanks, one that wasn't entirely pleasant. His experience working with Eastwood. Since the film's release, Hanks has opened up about what it was like to work under Eastwood's direction. For an actor who's faced cinematic plane crashes, wars, lifeboats, and desert islands, it's saying something when he describes the Sully set as more nerve-wracking than any of those on-screen experiences. Clint Eastwood, even then in his mid-80s, ran his set like a man who didn't believe in second chances. There were no outbursts, no raised voices, no frantic takes, just an unsettling calm. Direction was whispered, action was never shouted. Instead, actors got a barely audible go-ahead. Cut didn't come with fanfare, it came as a soft murmur. That's enough of that. He did not even realize the camera was rolling. To the casual observer, this might sound like a form of quiet professionalism, measured, confident, almost zen-like, but to the actors, especially Hanks, it felt like a silent pressure cooker. Hanks admitted that he often didn't even realize the camera had started rolling. He didn't know whether his last take was any good or if it was about to end up on the cutting room floor. He just kept going until Eastwood gave that subtle cue to stop. There was no safety net. And when you've got Clint Eastwood's icy, unblinking stare watching your every move, even a two-time Oscar winner starts to sweat. Hanks confessed that he avoided eye contact altogether, worried that one wrong glance might earn him that famously intimidating Eastwood squint. Didn't need words, it was a look that could strip the confidence right out of you. Eastwood's early days in television. Where did Eastwood pick up such an unorthodox directing style? It traces back to his early days in television, especially his time on the 1960s Western series Rawhide. Back then, directors would often scream action so loudly that the horses on set would bolt. Eastwood, known even then for his stoic presence, decided he'd never direct like that. He'd keep things quiet, controlled, calm, and he stuck with it for over 5 decades. Attention wrapped in silence. But what felt like discipline to Eastwood came off to Hanks and perhaps others as tension wrapped in silence. When the press tours came around, Hanks smiled on red carpets, said all the right things, and praised Clint's experience and style. But when the cameras shifted to late-night talk shows like The Graham Norton Show and Jimmy Kimmel Live, a different tone emerged. Hanks shared stories of Eastwood treating actors like horses, comparing the directing experience to a cowboy taming a stampede. He chuckled as he told it, but the laughter felt uneasy. The audience laughed, for sure, but it wasn't the hearty laughter of admiration. It felt closer to relief, even release, and Clint Eastwood noticed. Eastwood's directing style was who he is. He's never been one to fire back or feed the press machine publicity, but those close to him say he didn't take kindly to Hanks airing grievances, subtle or not, on national television. Eastwood is a man of deep conviction, fiercely private, and deeply proud of the work he's done behind the camera. His directing style isn't just a method, it's an extension of who he is. He believes in control, in precision, in discipline. Not in complaints, and certainly not in Hollywood-style storytelling that makes light of his way of working. Eastwood saw as mockery. When someone crosses that unspoken line, especially when it touches on respect, Eastwood doesn't just shrug it off. He's had feuds before. Some have been patched up, others have faded with time, but the ones that touch something personal, those are the ones he remembers. And in Eastwood's mind, Hanks crossed that line, not with a direct insult, not with a public denunciation, but with what Eastwood saw as mockery. By reducing his lifetime honed directing philosophy to a punchline on a talk show, Hanks turned something Eastwood holds sacred into banter for ratings. And that doesn't sit well with a man who's always believed in quiet dignity. Understanding and respect. Now at 94, Clint Eastwood is taking stock of his life, his legacy, his relationships, and inevitably his final days. He's not afraid to talk about his funeral, and when he does, it's clear that it won't be a star-studded affair just for the sake of appearance. He doesn't want spectacles, he doesn't wish to be hypocritical, he wants sincerity, which means, according to those close to him, there are a few names he'd prefer not to see there. And one of the names that keeps coming up? Tom Hanks. It's not about hatred, it's about principles. For Eastwood, a final farewell should be shared with those who truly understood and respected who he was, not just as a filmmaker but as a man. And when someone, even a beloved Hollywood icon, chips away at that, it leaves a scar that time doesn't erase. Not at 84, not at 90, not even at 94. Leonardo DiCaprio. And if there's another name that might appear on Clint Eastwood's unspoken list, the list of people he doesn't want at his funeral, it's Leonardo DiCaprio. When J. Edgar hit theaters in 2011, it had all the ingredients of an Oscar-seasoned powerhouse. Directed by Clint Eastwood, starring DiCaprio, with a script from Academy Award-winning screenwriter Dustin Lance Black. On paper, it should have been a significant moment in modern American cinema. The kind of film that picks up nominations by the handful and etches itself into the cultural memory. But the reality was far more complicated. Beneath the surface of this high-profile collaboration, there was a tension, quiet, restrained, but undeniable. It never made tabloid headlines. There were no public fallouts, no explosive interviews, but what happened on that set left a mark that neither party seems eager to revisit. J. Edgar. This was the first and only time Eastwood and DiCaprio worked together, and judging by what unfolded behind the scenes, it's safe to say it'll stay that way. The production faced challenges right from the start. The budget for J. Edgar was surprisingly modest, just $35 million. That's a tight number for a sweeping biopic that spans 5 decades, requires elaborate makeup and prosthetics, and asks a single actor to convincingly portray a man aging from his 20s to his 70s. Even with Eastwood's reputation for frugality and efficiency, it was a gamble. Warner Brothers didn't want to throw too much money at a film about a controversial historical figure, especially one helmed by a director known for minimalist takes and quick turnarounds. DiCaprio slashed down his fee. To his credit, DiCaprio did something remarkable. He slashed his usual $20 million fee down to just $2 million, a 90% pay cut. That kind of financial sacrifice is rare in Hollywood, and it spoke volumes. He believed in the story. He believed in the role. He believed in Eastwood. Or at least he wanted to. But belief and reality often collide in uncomfortable ways, and on this project they slammed hard. Efficient, near silent, and no negotiation. Eastwood, true to form, brought his signature directing style to the set. Efficient, near silent, and without room for negotiation. His process is famously quick. He shoots fast, rarely does multiple takes, and expects actors to be fully in character before the cameras start rolling. There are no rehearsals in the traditional sense, no extended table reads or exploratory sessions. Clint gives a quiet cue, often just a whisper of "go ahead," and lets the actors do their work. When he's satisfied, he doesn't call cut, he says, "That's enough of that." The message is clear, the scene's over and we're moving on. Confidence and decisiveness. For some actors, that style is refreshing. They see it as a mark of confidence and decisiveness. But for others, especially those like DiCaprio, who are deeply invested in process, preparation, and repetition, it can feel like a creative straitjacket. DiCaprio is known for his immersive, detail-driven approach. He builds characters from the ground up, layer by layer, often in close collaboration with directors like Martin Scorsese, Christopher Nolan, and Quentin Tarantino. On those sets, DiCaprio thrives. He explores, he adjusts, he finds the soul of a scene through trial and error. On Eastwood's set, there was no room for that. It was get it right the first time or don't get it at all. Rehearsal or the real take? Judi Dench, who also starred in the film, later confirmed how jarring Clint's approach could be, even for seasoned veterans. She recalled a moment when she and DiCaprio were casually chatting between what they thought were rehearsals, waiting for the real take to begin. But Clint had already started filming without announcing it. Later, they were told the scene was done. No retake, no adjustments, no extra try to refine the performance. It was over. Did not encourage retakes. When DiCaprio asked if they could go again, Eastwood shook his head. Day's over. That kind of finality works for directors who prioritize budget and pace, but it doesn't foster an environment where creativity feels nourished. For DiCaprio, who had physically and emotionally transformed himself for the role, sitting through hours of prosthetic makeup each day to become the aging J. Edgar Hoover, it was a jarring experience. He didn't just want to look the part, he wanted to live it, explore it, and perfect it. But under Eastwood's direction, there was no such luxury. Clint didn't want layers, he wanted speed. One shot, one take, done. Clint was not interested in the actor's journey. The physical demands were relentless. DiCaprio wore prosthetic teeth, a bald cap, a nose piece, and full-body aging makeup, sometimes for 12 hours straight. He altered his walk, voice, and posture. He wasn't just acting, he was immersing himself. But Clint wasn't interested in the actor's journey. He was focused on the result. Cameras roll, the shots captured, the day moves on. Eastwood personally demonstrated the fight scenes. Behind the scenes, things got even more unusual. In one particularly surreal moment, Eastwood personally demonstrated the fight choreography between DiCaprio's Hoover and Armie Hammer's Clyde Tolson. At 81 years old, Clint dropped to the floor with his longtime stunt partner, Buddy Van Horn, to show how he wanted the sequence to unfold. There were no storyboards, no stunt coordinators directing from the sidelines, just Clint, physically acting out the scene, expecting his stars to follow suit. Armie Hammer later called it impressive. DiCaprio, he stayed quiet. And in the world of Hollywood, silence can speak louder than any interview. No reunions, no follow-up projects. Once the film wrapped, there was no reunion, no follow-up projects, no buzz about another collaboration. And for an actor like DiCaprio, who's made 5 films with Scorsese and built lasting bonds with directors he admires, that silence was telling. Even during press tours, DiCaprio didn't exactly sing Eastwood's praises. He acknowledged the film, he discussed the character, but he didn't celebrate the experience of working with Clint the way he has with others. DiCaprio felt a lack of creativity. Insiders say DiCaprio felt creatively stifled. He went into the film expecting a collaboration, and what he got instead was a one-way street. A director who didn't want input, didn't wish to process, just execution. And for DiCaprio, that was a deal-breaker. The results spoke for themselves. J. Edgar made $84 million worldwide, not a failure but far from a blockbuster. The reviews were mixed. The Oscar buzz faded. It wasn't the breakout biopic some had hoped for, and the working relationship between two Hollywood titans ended, not with fanfare, but with a quiet goodbye. DiCaprio had a single project with Eastwood. Since then, DiCaprio has kept his distance. His post-J. Edgar projects have been with directors who give him space to explore. The Revenant with Alejandro Inarritu, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Tarantino, and Don't Look Up with Adam McKay. Not a single return to Eastwood, not even a whisper of it. And now, as Clint Eastwood reaches the twilight of his extraordinary career and begins to speak openly, albeit subtly, about his mortality, there's a noticeable clarity to how he's reflecting on the people he wants near him when he's gone. He's not interested in hollow tributes or public spectacle. He doesn't want his funeral to be a red carpet event dressed up as a memorial. He doesn't want people who showed up for the cameras. He wants authenticity, respect, quiet loyalty. Eastwood thinks about his legacy. Those who know him well say that Eastwood thinks about his legacy. He's drawing boundaries, some unspoken, others made crystal clear behind closed doors. And one of those boundaries includes who doesn't belong in that final chapter. People who didn't understand his process. People who clashed with his methods and walked away with stories, not respect. People who made the work about them, not the film. And yes, according to sources close to Eastwood, Leonardo DiCaprio is on that list. Clint Eastwood is a man of principle. Not because of some blowout argument, not because of personal animosity, but because Clint Eastwood is a man of principle. He values quiet strength. He values professionalism. He values those who respected his way, even when it wasn't easy. And in his eyes, DiCaprio may have performed, but he didn't give his trust, not fully, not openly. So when Clint Eastwood talks about the people he doesn't want at his funeral, it's not about ego, it's about control. Just like on his sets, he wants his final moments to be deliberate, disciplined, genuine. No dramatics, no flashbulbs, no empty words, and no floral wreaths from Leonardo DiCaprio. Because in Clint's world, one film isn't enough to earn your place at the end, not if the silence between you said more than a script ever could. Spike Lee. If you think that's where the list ends, think again, because if there's one name that might be carved in bold on Clint Eastwood's silent blacklist, the one that decides who's not welcome at his funeral, it's Spike Lee. Their feud wasn't quiet. It didn't happen in whispered words behind closed doors or subtle gestures on a movie set. No, this one was loud, public, and painfully personal. It played out in headlines, on red carpets, and across continents. It hit Cannes, it hit the evening news. It got so heated that none other than Steven Spielberg had to step in and try to put out the fire. Flags of Our Fathers. The spark was lit back in 2006 when Eastwood released Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, two companion films that told the story of the same World War II battle from two very different perspectives. Flags followed the American side, focusing on the 6 men, 5 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman, who raised the American flag on Mount Suribachi during the brutal Battle of Iwo Jima. That photo, captured by Joe Rosenthal, became one of the most iconic images in American military history. Letters, meanwhile, flipped the script. It told the story of the same battle from the Japanese perspective, in their language, with their pain and sacrifice. The result was critically lauded. Letters from Iwo Jima earned 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Director for Eastwood. Many critics called it the stronger of the two, praising Eastwood's willingness to humanize the so-called enemy. He publicly criticized Eastwood, but not everyone was impressed. In 2008, as Spike Lee promoted his own World War II drama, Miracle at St. Anna, at the Cannes Film Festival, he didn't mince words. He publicly criticized Eastwood for erasing black soldiers from both Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. He pointed out that nearly 1 million African-American men and women served in the U.S. military during World War II. The Black Marines fought and died at Iwo Jima. That to make 2 films about one of the bloodiest, most pivotal battles of the war and virtually omit them was not just an oversight, it was erasure. Absence of black soldiers. And the receipts were hard to ignore. In Flags of Our Fathers, the only glimpse of a black soldier comes in a brief background shot, a wounded man being carried off a stretcher. No dialogue, no character, just a fleeting image, almost out of focus. Letters had none at all, understandably so, given the emphasis on Japanese soldiers. But for Lee, that didn't absolve Eastwood of responsibility. Because of Spike, the point wasn't that black soldiers didn't raise the flag. The point was they were there, on the island, in the mud, in the trenches. And by ignoring them, Eastwood was reinforcing a larger problem in Hollywood, a habit of whitewashing history to fit a convenient, narrow lens. That's when the feud exploded. Eastwood's response was blunt. Eastwood, never one to tiptoe around a challenge, fired back. His response was blunt to the point of being caustic. He argued that Flags of Our Fathers was about a particular event, the 6 men who raised the flag in the Rosenthal photo. Those 6 were white. That was the story he wanted to tell. According to him, adding characters who weren't in that photo to satisfy diversity optics would have been historically inaccurate. That was his defense. But then Clint went further. Too far in many eyes. In a press interview, he told Spike Lee to shut his face. Just like that, it stopped being a disagreement over creative choices. It turned into a personal war. Lee fired back with force. Lee didn't stay silent. He fired back with the force of someone who's been watching his community erased for decades. He wasn't fabricating history, he said, he was correcting it. Black soldiers were at Iwo Jima. Maybe not in that one iconic photo, but they were there. They fought, they bled, they died. And yet, again, Hollywood had chosen not to see them. Lee said he didn't think Eastwood was racist, but he certainly thought he was out of touch. And he was tired of the industry hiding behind historical accuracy when the truth was often more complex and more inclusive than the stories being told. Eastwood pointed to his biopic on Charlie Parker. Eastwood, for his part, didn't see the issue. He pointed to Bird, his 1988 biopic of jazz legend Charlie Parker starring Forrest Whitaker, as proof that he understood and respected black stories. The film had a nearly all-black cast and was widely praised at the time. To Clint, that was evidence of his balance, on his range, of his integrity. But to Lee, that wasn't the point. One film from 20 years prior didn't cancel out a pattern. This wasn't about Bird. This was about systemic exclusion. It was about the way Hollywood frames war, heroism, and sacrifice through a predominantly white lens, film after film, decade after decade. Critics dissected every letter. The war of words dragged on. It made headlines in The Guardian. ABC News picked it up. Pundits weighed in. Filmmakers took sides. Film critics dissected every frame of flags and letters, trying to understand what the feud revealed, not just about these 2 men, but about the film industry at large. It became more than a spat. It was a standoff between 2 generations of directors, 2 visions of history, and 2 fundamentally different understandings of what storytelling is supposed to do. And then came Spielberg. Spielberg's respect for both men. Steven Spielberg had quietly produced both Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. He was also a friend to both Eastwood and Lee, respected by both men in different ways. When the feud reached its boiling point, Spielberg stepped in, not with a public statement, not with a press conference, but with quiet, deliberate diplomacy. He made private phone calls. He arranged closed-door conversations. He played the role of mediator, confidant, and peacemaker. And it worked. Sort of. Lee eventually sent Eastwood one of his later films for a private screening, not as an olive branch exactly, but as a gesture of respect through Spielberg's channels. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't friendship. It was détente, a ceasefire, not a resolution. They've never collaborated. Since then, the silence between them has been loud. They've never collaborated. They've never spoken about each other in interviews. They've never been seen at the same table or even at the same event since. And those close to Eastwood say that feud left a mark, not because of the disagreement itself, but because of how it unfolded. Clint Eastwood is a man who values respect, especially in public. He's old school. You can disagree with him, even challenge him, but once you call him out on a global stage, once you use your platform to paint him as part of the problem, he doesn't forget. Ever. To Eastwood, Lee didn't just question his film, he asked about his integrity, loudly and globally. And worse, he did it in front of the cameras. That's the kind of thing Clint doesn't forgive. He builds his world on quiet loyalty. You don't have to like his methods, but if you put him on blast, he creates a wall you don't get to climb again. Spike's name sits heavy on the list. That's why Spike Lee's name, according to those close to Eastwood, sits heavy on the list of people Clint doesn't want at his funeral. Not because of politics, not because of race, but because of what Clint sees as a public betrayal. For Eastwood, final goodbyes should be reserved for people who understood him, even if they disagreed with him. But if you turn the cameras on him in anger, if you use your platform to humiliate rather than challenge, then you're out. Because to Clint Eastwood, storytelling is sacred, loyalty is sacred, and public disrespect, that's unforgivable. So when the day finally comes and the industry lines up to honor the legend, don't expect to see Spike Lee among them. Not in the front row, not in the back, not at all. Because once you drag Clint into a fight in front of the world, there's no coming back, not in life and certainly not in death. Michael Moore. It's carved in stone when it comes to Michael Moore. The feud between Clint Eastwood and Moore goes far beyond creative differences. This one is personal, it's bitter, and it's never cooled down. Their first public clash erupted in 2005 at the National Board of Review Awards dinner. In a room full of Hollywood insiders, Clint made a comment about Moore that still echoes nearly 2 decades later. According to Moore, Eastwood told the crowd that if Moore ever showed up at his house with a camera, he'd shoot him. Not metaphorically, not jokingly, but with intent. Moore says Eastwood didn't smirk, didn't laugh, and didn't walk it back. He said it and then added that he meant it. Moore Oscar-winning documentary. At the time, Moore had just come off the success of Bowling for Columbine, his Oscar-winning documentary on gun violence. The film famously included an ambush interview with Charlton Heston, then president of the NRA, at his own home, an interview conducted while Heston was already battling Alzheimer's. To Eastwood, it was a low blow. That moment lit a fuse in him that never really burned out. Years later, in 2015, Eastwood spoke about the incident once again during a live Q&A at the CinemaCon in Las Vegas. This time, he tried to soften the story, claiming he hadn't threatened Moore's life, but then added that the idea wasn't such a bad one. The line drew nervous laughter, but nobody forgot it. Because when Clint Eastwood talks about standing his ground, he means it. And when someone crosses a line, he doesn't hold a grudge, he draws a new line in concrete. Moore laughed to avoid a situation. Moore responded with a lengthy Facebook post. He said he laughed at the time to avoid escalating the situation, but he also claimed Clint didn't appreciate the crowd's laughter and doubled down, repeating it even more firmly. According to Moore, Eastwood made it unmistakably clear this wasn't a joke, it was personal. The feud reignited in 2014 when Eastwood released American Sniper, a gritty, patriotic portrayal of Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle. The film became the highest-grossing domestic release of the year, pulling in over $547 million globally. But Moore called the film dangerous, accusing it of rewriting history and glorifying violence. He even referred to snipers as cowards, single word that ignited a firestorm. Celebrities, veterans, and fans rallied behind Eastwood and Kyle. Clint didn't say much publicly, but sources close to him said he was furious. Challenging those in power. By that point, Moore and Eastwood weren't just ideological opposites, they stood on opposite sides of American identity itself. Moore built his career by challenging institutions and holding those in power accountable. Clint built his legacy by defending personal freedom, law, and tradition. To Moore, American Sniper was propaganda. To Eastwood, it was patriotism. And when Moore aimed the film, Clint saw it as more than criticism. He saw it as an attack on everything he stood for. That's why the feud never faded. There were no peace talks, no handshakes, no apology. Eastwood has always believed in personal liberty and property rights. If someone like Moore were to show up uninvited, especially with a film crew, Clint believes he has every right to protect his space in his way. That kind of thinking doesn't blend with Moore's brand of confrontational activism, and that, at its core, is the heart of their conflict. Moore kept the feud alive. Over the years, Moore kept the feud alive with subtle and not-so-subtle jabs. He brought up the 2005 threat whenever American Sniper returned to public conversation. He mentioned the dinner, the remark, and the tone. He warned about the dangers of hate speech and the impact of power dynamics. And while Eastwood never added fuel to the fire, he never denied the grudge either. He just let it live. That's why when Clint Eastwood's final chapter is written, Michael Moore won't be anywhere near it. Not at the memorial, not at the tributes, not quoted in legacy retrospectives. Not because of one moment, but because of everything it represented. To Eastwood, respect is earned, boundaries are sacred, and enemies don't get a seat at the table, not even in death. John Wayne. For years, Hollywood fans asked the same question. Why didn't two of the biggest legends in Western history ever share the screen? The answer isn't just ego, it's personal. It's about power, values, and the slow death of a golden era that neither man could let go. Think this was just a disagreement between actors? Not even close. This was a full-blown cinematic Cold War, and it all started with a letter. Not a phone call, not a meeting, a letter. So bitter, it ended all chances of peace between them. Back in the 1960s, Clint Eastwood exploded into stardom with Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy, Fistful of Dollars in 1964, For a Few Dollars More in '65, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in '66. These films redefined the Western. The clean-cut, law-abiding cowboy was dead. In his place stood Eastwood's anti-hero, gritty, silent, morally gray, and violently efficient. It was a direct shot across the bow of everything John Wayne had built his image on. Wayne's breakout in Stagecoach. Wayne, a towering figure since his breakout in Stagecoach in 1939, had spent decades portraying clear-cut heroes, men of honor, patriotism, and principle. He embodied the myth of old-school America. Eastwood, 25 years younger, was dismantling that myth, one blood-stained poncho at a time. By 1973, things reached a boiling point. That year, Eastwood released High Plains Drifter, his second film as a director, and it pulled no punches. In it, he plays a nameless drifter hired by a desperate town to protect them from outlaws. But he's no noble savior. He's violent, vengeful, almost supernatural. The city paints his name on a coffin. He renames the town Hell. This wasn't just a Western, it was a nightmare, cynical, brutal, and unapologetic. John Wayne hated it. Accused Eastwood of disrespecting the real pioneers. After seeing the film, Wayne sent Eastwood a handwritten letter. It wasn't polite, it wasn't diplomatic. He accused Eastwood of disrespecting the real pioneers of the American West, dishonoring the people who built the country. But between the lines, Eastwood read something else. Stay in your lane, kid. Clint didn't flinch. He later said the film was never meant to be realistic. It was a fable, a myth twisted through a darker lens. I wasn't trying to show hours of pioneering drudgery, he said. I was showing something else, and that something else was precisely what Wayne couldn't stand. Then it got personal. Around the same time, Eastwood was developing a project with director Larry Cohen called The Hostiles. It featured a young gambler, played by Eastwood, and an older cowboy mentor. Eastwood envisioned John Wayne in that role. It would have been monumental. Two Western icons, one screen, one final reckoning. Eastwood liked the script. He offered it to Wayne. Wayne didn't just decline, he trashed it, literally. When Clint sent a revised version, Wayne's son Mike handed it to him while they were out sailing. Wayne looked at the pages, muttered "this piece of shast" again, and tossed the script into the ocean. That was the end of it. Clint never tried again. Wayne did not respect Eastwood's vision. The rejection stung, not just because Wayne passed, but because of how he passed. It wasn't professional, it was personal. Wayne made it clear he didn't respect Eastwood's vision. He saw these darker, broodier Westerns as poison to the genre he helped define. And he couldn't stand watching Clint rise while his era faded into the sunset. Eastwood, meanwhile, kept climbing. Dirty Harry in 1971, The Outlaw Josie Wales in '76, and eventually Unforgiven in 1992, a book that deconstructed the cowboy myth entirely. It didn't glorify violence, it condemned it. It didn't celebrate gunmen, it haunted them. It won Eastwood the Oscar for Best Director, and it closed the book on the genre in a way John Wayne never could have imagined. Wayne died in 1979. He never softened his stance. He believed Westerns should inspire, not disturb. Clint thought they should tell the truth, even if it was dark. And when Eastwood began shaping his legacy, he made one thing clear. His final chapter would only include those who respected the journey, who understood how and why he changed cinema, and who weren't afraid of evolution. If you like what you watched, please like this video and subscribe for more similar content. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon